Just to clarify with our new board members and of course our old ones, this is a workshop. There's no action being taken, just a discussion, and then anything we discuss, we can actually put on the agenda for next Thursday. So, just to clarify, and let you know we are live streaming this meeting. So, from there, I'll turn it over to Mr. Boyd.
Sure, thank you. Just trying to stay in the order of the agenda. First item, there's no items under academics, but in looking to the board meeting, as I have shared previously, I will spend some time at the board meeting, in the public meeting, going over the data, just a summary of all of our data, including data that's been shared with you, but try to summarize it and highlight all the good things that we have from our data, and certainly keep in mind the things that we know are challenges that we're working hard on. So that will be an item on the next board agenda as far as the presentation.
Anything in them challenges that you need to talk to us about?
Sure. Our big challenge, of course, is the number of students that are below grade level in English language arts, well, all of our subject areas. But it's going to take time. We're not just overcoming COVID, but it takes a time to retool our teachers in teaching in a way that many of them haven't ever taught before. And they're all working very hard to learn and to grow as a professional. So it is going to take time to shift. But as long as it's continually over the next several years, our goal and our expectation is with that effort, we're going to see improvements as far as the increased number of students reading on grade level as the test scores anyway indicate. But yeah, I'll try to highlight that in my presentation.
I didn't know if you had some kind of
That's in November.
a plan or something you wanted to talk about.
Well, I can share the plan. Yeah, we have a plan.
I'm just,
But it's all in
instead
the,
of bringing it up in the
yes.
regular board meeting,
Yeah, well, it's all in the, we're trying to stay aligned, and that's our intent, is stay aligned with the board strategic plan, and a lot of that's around improving student achievement, and that includes teacher support and training, higher expectations, always trying to raise the bar on what we expect of students and ourselves. The plan right now for us is the strategic plan.
Mr. Boyd,
Yes, sir.
on that note, will there be how do students sign up for the tutor, since we're doing that extra tutoring and stuff?
Okay, well, they can't.
Okay.
It's identified based on their level of performance.
Okay.
Yeah, so the in-school tutoring that we're rolling out is based on a group of students that are within a certain performance range.
Now, will that change ever so often to identify others that are starting to go behind?
For some students, yeah, if we identify students in the beginning and then they show improvement and they no longer are within that range of performance, then they don't need that direct tutoring anymore.
Okay.
But the intent is, especially if it's a student starts the year behind, is that really to be effective, they need to be supported all the year.
Okay.
Unless there's some kind of significant improvement.
Right.
Maybe the test scores were just not valid, not right.
Okay.
And we see that they really are way beyond what the test scores indicated, and we would move on.
Okay, thank you.
Are any of those test scores that we see, are they correlating with attendance?
Well, in most cases, they always do. When we have students that are chronically absent, they generally also are low achieving students.
So what is our steps right now for that, for the kids at high schools and there, what is our steps to try to get them back?
Well, just by the letter of the law, after 5 days, there needs to be communication from the school. And so there needs to be an intermediate attempt or effort before it gets to the courts. So, you start that as soon as they hit 5 days. You start the communication with families, and then you continue that, and you try to improve their attendance. But ultimately, they end up with this grade, If they don't, then they end up going to court and get involved with, juvenile court and their attendance.
Excuse me.
Unfortunately, I mean, we certainly want to work with families as much as we can, but at some point, if there's not a response, then we have to follow all the steps, including what the law says.
So are those consecutive days or just 5 days?
No, it's 5 days.
Okay.
It's not consecutive.
Have enough staff or tutors been hired to cover the,
Well, to cover the group that we need, the answer is no, we're still continuing to try to hire. I do believe to get us completely off the ground as far as fully operational, it's gonna take us this whole year. Number one, it's a mindset change. Even with our tutors that are experienced teachers, there's a specific training they have to go through, and there's a specific process they have to follow. So, and we just still have people that are just fatigued, and they may be interested, but the commitment's more than they want to do right now. But yeah, we have tutors, and we also have multiple funding sources. So right now we have funding for tutors from the state of Tennessee, and we also are involved in partnership with Nicewalkers. So we have, it's not a function of not having sufficient funds, it's just people is the challenge.
And that process has started?
Yes, sir. Yeah. We've hired tutors. We've had, especially last year with Nicewalker, we've had the tutoring process going on a much smaller scale. But our goal is, first of all, to meet the third grade retention law that is in effect this year, but it impacts this year's third graders. Those that don't meet grade level expectations, if they fall in the second lowest category of performance, the approaching, their options are go to summer school or in the fourth grade have a tutor all year. So we have to be ready for that, especially looking at our numbers this year. That's a significant number of students. Assuming that many parents might choose to not send their students to summer school.
What's the difference? What is Sullivan County? What are they? Is it Sutton or Carter County? One of them is against the third grade.
Well, several boards have come out against it. But it is the law. It was passed in January 2021. It just was not implemented or not to be implemented until this school year. Mainly because if you look at this year's numbers as a state, the way that the criteria is, then it would impact the required remediation, which is summer school and a tutor. It impacts close to 70% of students in the state of Tennessee in third grade. In that neighborhood, right in that range.
And are they basing that on TCAPs only?
It's all based on the performance on the TCAP. Yes, ma'am.
One day.
Well, yeah, and it is. We have some opportunities during the year as we do our benchmarks and the formative assessment to show that it might not match the TCAP, but still the way the law is written, the performance levels, it's approaching and below. It's a the approaching group, which is, just close. A lot of them are close to reaching that benchmark to be considered on grade level. They have options, those students. We have options with them, like I said, that they can either just go to summer school and move on to fourth grade, or they can, in the fourth grade, have an assigned tutor. But if they're below, the students that are significantly below grade level based on TCAP, then it's required for both, or they're retained. The third option in all of those is, are they stay in the third grade, which, most of us know that's has probably more negative impact than the
Correct.
other options.
So I just thought, I don't think that parents will buck summer school. It will not hurt them, and it will greatly help them. But, holding them back when you have straight A's and B's and you failed a test for one day, there's going to be some pushback on that.
Right, you're right. And we had previously a retention law similar, but
Right.
the legislation in January 2021 made it a lot more
So
higher stakes.
do we know that our parents are fully aware of this?
And we're sending, the timeline is we're sending out a letter, mainly in October,
Right.
that will, all third grade parents, and then also in the letter will indicate if their child is at risk. You know, it'd be informational for all third grade parents, but then if their children are at risk in this first quarter of our school year, it'll also let them know that.
Would it not be helpful in advance to note to the second graders and below? Because, I mean, they're upcoming, you know, that could possibly be,
It'd be an educational, I mean, you know, we definitely will need to educate all of our parents.
Exactly.
Third grade is the highest priority of the parents this
Right.
year. But yeah, all of our parents, even kindergarten, you know, they need to
Because-
understand, you know, really, and we know that the greatest impact we can have is that we do all these interventions prior to third grade and have an impact to where we're having fewer students faced with this issue in third grade.
I just feel like the more knowledge we can give them from K through 3, the better off we're gonna be in the future, and the fact that, you know, maybe they'll work with them a little more, maybe they'll send them to summer school if they're
Right.
treading that line in second grade. So.
Yeah, and then the other part of the law too, if we do, I mean, if they move on, you know, to one of those categories and you know, whether they go to summer school or tutoring, and if they move on to the fourth grade and they're not successful or they don't show significant improvement in the fourth grade, then the requirement of the law is then to retain the fourth grade.
Well, the summer camps that the staff has been putting together have been phenomenal, so I would encourage
And
anybody.
it's all set up, you know, knowing this law, it was all tied together, so that
Correct.
exceptional session that happened in January 2021 had all these components about summer programming, but then the law about, you know, it wasn't called the retention law, it was called Acceleration and Remediation Act, because it was intended to be a remediation approach, but, you know, ultimately, it's still a conversation about retention that some families and some students face. But yeah, those things are tied together, so we've had 2 years to do the summer programming in the way that it might be moving forward, a little different than the previous years of summer school.
I just want our
in
system to be
preparation.
very proactive with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, I think having a chance to really support those students in summer school has been a huge advantage for our students and all the districts that have done it.
Well, I think that's why we're,
Changing mindset a little bit. That they realize, well, we need that extra 4 weeks in the summer for targeted intervention for reading, then, you know, parents hopefully will continue to support that. But, yeah, it's you know, and to the point about, I guess Carter County has made a public statement, and several others have. It's really focused around the lack of local flexibility, you know, which happens in some laws. I mean, sometimes laws are passed and we basically remove all local flexibility. I will point out too, the flexibility that is built into the law was in the previous version of the law, where if they're a student that had already been retained prior to third grade, or if they're a student on an individual education plan, an IEP, then they're somewhat, where they're exempt from that whole process. But see, we still want to get those students to summer school just to continue.
Exactly.
They need the additional supports regardless if they're exempt from being retained, but they need the additional academic support.
Well, we know the kids better than the state does.
Well, their intentions were in a good place, it just, you know, we need to have a,
Yeah,
I think their intentions are good.
there's a strong belief in, you know, that the idea of retaining students, it's around high expectations and accountability, but, you know, we have decades and decades of data that shows when a student's retained, their probability of graduating high school on time or being successful continues, it drops. If they're retained twice, the probability of them dropping out of school before they graduate high school increases significantly.
I asked for this item to be put on later on in the meeting.
Yeah, it's on our
Right, and
directory,
I'm
yes, sir.
looking to see the board take and make a resolution going along with a number of other school boards across the state in regards to this, so the legislature can change it, but when we get to that point, I will bring it up further.
Sure. Yeah, that is item, it does belong under academics, but we put it under the list of items that were explicitly requested by board members, and that's later in the agenda. So if we can, we'll move to business and finance, and, Mr. Hill was not able to be here. Actually, it's his wedding anniversary, and he asked for permission not to be here, and I said, you shouldn't.
Been cheaper to be
You don't
here.
need to ask me, you need to make sure. But so he has provided a summary for the board in his list of documents, basically what he would, if he was presenting to you and bringing it to all of your attention, it was what he would say if you were here. Of all these documents, just a quick update, as you can see in the summary when you have a chance to look at it. Revenue, we're about the same as we were a year ago. And he identified that sales tax collections is still continuing to demonstrate strong growth. He identified over 200,000 more in collections than last year in August. Yeah. So, but he mentioned in his statement about revenue and the timing of it. So it was a little less than it was a year ago, but it's all about when certain expenditures come out and when they don't. And you can see his next item is certainly round expenses. He highlighted that August is usually our lowest because the first certified payroll for the new year is in September. So next, September expenditure report will be much greater than August.
September's was the big one anyway, wasn't it, for the teachers' pay?
Yeah, that was the first payroll for our teachers to receive their first salaries, so payment of the year based on the new scale. So yeah, it was significant, a lot of good feedback, and I don't know if the board received it, but from teachers and others just after that payroll.
I have that, and they've been very appreciative.
Yeah, they expressed a lot of positive gratitude and appreciated the support, and we're happy to actually see it.
Yes.
And then as our federal funds, the federal budget year, we try to get things as much as possible wrapped up at the end of the normal fiscal year in June 30th, but the actual fiscal year for federal programs doesn't end until September 30th, and the new one starts October 1st. And then you can see our dietary fund, or the school nutrition fund. And you can read, he's showing some decline in fund balance. They've had to use some of their fund balance, mainly just increased costs, of course. And we're still trying to navigate the waters with some of at the federal level about federal lunch programs, and so there's a lawsuit going on that's causing some challenges there across many school districts.
Mr. Flame?
Mr. Boyd, if you would you have Ms. Kite look into the dietary, and since she has about a month to go on in her books, as far as not what we see here, but how much people's getting lunch, how many people, you know what I'm saying, and how much they're behind on their payment,
Right.
or whatever.
Well, Dr. Adams shared with me a concern, and that it's going to be directly discussed that we had a large number of students and families charging, so we had a huge amount of charged meals in the past month.
Yeah, but
So, that we just need to keep that on the radar.
would
Any
you just
reason why?
report that back to us?
Well, I would like to know the why behind it. We can make a lot of assumptions, but we'd like to know if it was just the first of the year, or if it, especially after next month, if it's a trend that we really have to be.
Well, I was
very
thinking
concerned
just where we
about.
went up on price. I didn't know if that had any bearings on it or not.
And I think it's also getting back into routine of, the responsibility of the cost going back to some of the families.
I didn't know how much was in Parker's lunch account, so until they sent me a letter that said, hey, send me some money.
And that too, so kind
They
of
do
get back
that.
into.
I didn't
your
know how,
routine.
you know, because I haven't seen that since 2019.
Yeah.
So,
I would suspect that's some of it. It's not that people are refusing to, or in some cases also. they're
And a
just
lot
not
of
able.
people just felt like the kids needs to eat free.
Yeah, is that, Dr. Adams?
It's at, as of, I think, today, it's at $34,000 so far. It was $6,000 from this time last week to today.
Yeah, been a huge, so. Definitely, as, if each month clicks off like that, I mean, obviously that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge deficit
Mhm.
that it would create. And then also, we're not designed to be a collection agency, so it's very difficult to get those funds back in many cases.
If they do owe, I think we've gone over this before, if they do have a balance where they're, due, they are given a lunch, but they're not allowed to do the extras, right?
Right, they're offered a
Okay.
meal. Yes,
All right,
ma'am.
that's good.
They're offered a meal.
But not ice cream and all.
Right, it's just a very limited by the letter of the requirements.
do we still have the app where they can check their payments and stuff? Is that something that's still available? Is
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
that on the website?
It could be that we just need to have, some refresher reminders. But I think each individual school might have, they'll have a better view on it, and then they may even have a different reason at different schools.
Okay, I guess going to purchase orders.
So, of course, you got all your reports, and you want to jump into which section, Mr. Master?
I guess is what I've got next.
The food service
Food
here?
service, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to pull that one up?
You can if you want to pull it up, but it's just, things that are coming your way because it's a large amount.
Will you go into a little detail about what this is? I didn't understand it.
This purchase of items.
Yeah, is it just a broad general, that's where we get a lot of stuff from, and we just wanted you to approve?
This is our
$125,000?
contract purchase, right? With
Yes.
Gordon's Food. Yeah.
Okay.
So the board actually approved the contract.
Okay,
This is just, I guess it's an invoice for that purchase.
Okay.
And it's over $10,000, so we felt like it still was important to bring it back in front of the board.
is this for a month?
I think it's up to date,
Okay.
for the essentially, yes, the first month.
Is this for the after-school program that we have? Because it says supper program on it.
We also, we have some, that's also paying for the foods that we provide in the two after-school programs, one at Jonesboro Elementary School.
That's what I
one
thought. I
at,
thought it was just
Boones Creek
$125,000 for
Elementary
them,
School.
so.
Okay. So it's the two different schools.
Yes.
You put that under, does anybody have a problem putting that under
Oh, this going to consent agenda.
consent agenda?
And as a reminder, your board policy, a board member can request any consent item to
Right.
be pulled off before approving the consent agenda. Next item is just, through using ESSER funds, purchase of various office supplies, equipment, specific to special education services. Item 3A3 is just for our contract with Frontier Health. You can see several schools we contracted with Frontier Health to provide those support services. And I'm going to run through these, and then I know and I trust that if you have a question, you'll just jump in there. Raptor, of course, is our system where we, item 34A, or 3A4, I'm sorry, purchase order 6883. Raptor Technology, that's our system that we use for visitor management. And that's an annual renewal, that's a service we pay.
It's for the year,
It's
right?
an annual renewal.
Is it still going well as far as?
Yeah, you know, it's a commonly used service across several districts. It does what it needs to do. As we've done our, and I point to Dr. Adams, because as we've done our school safety walkthroughs and assessments, you know, number one, it reinforces that it's certainly a service that we need to continue to use. But we believe there's also additional services within that software that we could even incorporate more in our school safety responses. Instead of trying to use a bunch of different, for example, databases and different services, we can actually lean on this one as well. But it's an annual renewal, so that's certainly, and it's probably, I mean, just for full transparency, that's the usage service. I'm sure when we implemented Raptor, it had equipment in it, so your initial purchase of Raptor included, I'm sure, the first year of service and any equipment and supplies that were required to start it up. So this is the annual renewal, just for the service.
And Debbie shop within 6 weeks of this that's going on.
Yeah, and clicked off. So purchase orders. Yeah. Yeah, when you get clicked off, then you have to find a way back.
Sorry.
Okay, that's my fault. So Gallopade is just a, you know, a state-approved instructional resource. It's our social studies, and, you know, it has materials that are renewed each year. And this is just purchase. So we have targeted the use of non-local dollars to purchase this, and this is, as you note in the description, we're using ESSER funds to purchase these instructional materials. Next item, which is item 3A6, it's just, you can see, it's bus purchases. I mean, it's materials, basically. So then we get into operations. The first item is just items to be declared for surplus, submitted through Dr. Adams'
It's all lights.
department.
Yeah, it's all-
Yeah,
it's
it's
all
all lights.
lights.
All lights.
Yeah.
Lights, okay.
It's all
Is that the one we
lights.
took down?
Yes. You know, they're still board property, they're an asset, and to dispose of them, we have to declare them surplus.
Should we not maybe keep a few of them for parts for like Lamar and
Oh, it's been
other
upgraded.
places? Because that's probably the same kind of lights we got.
And LEDs.
Well, where we have, where we would have a need, yeah, I agree with that. I agree. I don't know that we have any that we could repurpose these lights, but if we can, as far as the parts of it, yes.
I mean, mercury vapor may be good enough to go to the Smithsonian.
Do what?
So maybe mercury vapors will be good enough to go to the Smithsonian now.
I didn't know. I mean, it just, I figured that some other schools would have them kind of lights. Any of them's worth using for parts. or
Yeah, I mean, if we need to identify that, but I don't believe so. But that would, then we can put it on Gov Deals, and any interested person could bid on it through Gov Deals. Let's see, the next item is just bringing back the discussion of van purchases. That was a motion made to defer that to the next board meeting.
So what are the vans for? Like, are they for the kids to ride in? Or are they
Maintenance.
maintenance? What are they called?
The 15-passenger courses for the school board. There's 2 8-passenger vans, one for each high school. The purpose of that is giving the school the new vans, and then the oldest of the vans at each high school we are going to let the transition school to work people use those so they can use vans to transport special ed kids going out to their job sites instead of having to drive a school bus. So it makes it a little bit easier for them. And then the other 2 cargo vans are for 2 of our technology guys, Vince Sweeney and Larry. Vince's van has a lot of miles on it, it's 2007, and Larry's, I think, is 2001 and also has a lot of miles on it. And so as we look to just update our fleet, those were 2 of the ones that are probably the most in need of replacement.
So these are replacement vans, right?
The 2 cargo vans, yes. If you get permission to buy those, then we'll surplus the old ones.
Okay. So will one of these vans that's going to the high school replace the one that had such a hard time on the tires?
Those tires were replaced.
But that one's still a good van, is that what we're saying? The tires just weren't good?
Right. I mean, it's a decent van. I mean, I think as high schools had their way, they'd get 3 new ones apiece or 4.
Oh, yes.
But this will, again, the vans are decent, but buying new ones then allows us, again, to help the transition school to work program. Because right now they're taking a full-size bus with, maybe 3 or 4 kids on it, the bus driver. This way we can have a van, and it just makes it a little bit easier to get around, a little more cost-effective.
I don't guess we can put these purchase for the vans for the schools, kids, in with the school bus
I know we've
purchasing.
tried that before.
I know. And if we can try again.
Oh, you're talking going through
We tried that
the
before.
county, through capital funds? That wasn't our intent. but-
Well, you know what I'm
I
saying.
understand.
We've done it before and we tried to do it and
Yeah.
it didn't succeed, but
Yeah.
you wanna try again?
I mean, what I've observed in those conversations with you and the budget committee, I think they're pretty clear on the intent is for actual buses.
Yeah, well, it's part of
I'll hurt
the
to
kids.
ask.
Don't hurt to
Understand.
ask.
No.
But we have, and it's been the practice of Washington County, and every year in the budget, I mean, Brad specifically identifies and keeps funds in a line item so that we can purchase, do our refresh cycle on these vehicles as they come, as the need arises.
So we're purchasing 5 vans total, right? 2 maintenance, 2 high school, and 1 for the board.
Yes.
And 1 pickup truck next.
Then
Yeah, the
pickup
next
truck.
item are part of, maintenance, I believe. Same vehicle purchase on the refresh.
So what does the transportation do? Is this for them to go pick up buses if something happens to it, or to go out and work on those buses?
Both.
Both?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, they go to the site if a bus breaks down,
Okay.
and if they can repair it, then, they will. If not, then ultimately we have to call tow service. Like last spring when that limb fell on that bus.
Yes. How was
We
that?
had to eventually, it had to be towed back to the bus garage.
All these on state contract.
Yes. Yeah, all of these are purchased on the state.
Okay.
I will say this, we used to buy used vehicles.
They don't exist anymore.
Well, they're out.
What I've been seeing though, you can buy new cheap as you can buy used.
That's right.
Well, I'm sitting there looking at $38,000.
When you're talking about, especially a truck, I mean, you would know better than I would. Even the used trucks
Yeah.
they're pretty proud of
Yes.
them.
I know.
Very high
A lot of
price.
them's wore out with miles. They're still good.
Yeah, the new ones that I just saw 2 days ago were 49,000, so.
And I think, although I don't think buying on the state contract, we get a tremendous discount.
About
But we do
10,000.
get, there is a discount. It's less than what you would do if you went to the lot,
Yeah.
private citizen.
It'd be hard to buy
So-
a new 23 F-150 for 38,000.
So this will all come out of our fund balance, correct?
No, man, this comes out of it in the
That's our
budget line item that's
Line
specific to
Okay.
our fleet. Yeah, so what I've, I witnessed from I guess, an outside perspective with having the educational capital funds, and we're specifically buying the buses out of that, you don't have that expenditure in the general purpose budget, but you do have fleet costs, and that's what's in that line item, which covers these vans and pickup trucks and other items like that.
It ain't gonna get there very fast. So, I mean,
I just noticed that 15 passenger V6. It's gonna hurt us.
Yeah, well, now the V6, with their horsepower and power, but no, I don't think we would win any races. But fuel economy.
Ours will be faster than the one we
And just reliability of the motor, yeah. So, next item is not an expenditure item. It was something I'd shared with all the board following up I asked Ms. Bradford to come and spend a couple days with Tony and look at our transportation services, and from her view of having been a state trainer and having been a transportation supervisor for several years and a bus driver for many, even more years than that. She spent time with Tony, and I shared with you her feedback. The concerns that she brought up were things have changed over the last several years in bus transportation, particularly after that terrible accident in Chattanooga. And so the requirements of reporting and compliance has increased significantly. And she just noted that we have a need to have someone that is primarily responsible for that, in addition to daily operation. That's Tony's responsibility, is overseeing and managing daily operations. But having, there's so many requirements and so much detail in those requirements. She just suggested that as a school system, we might need to hire somebody that's qualified, that can manage and learn. They may not know the requirements, but they can learn how to be basically a support for a compliance officer, internal compliance officer. She didn't call it that, but that's basically what she was saying.
Have you got a job?
I do not currently have one, but we certainly, there's available ones, and we can pull from what's existing in some of the school districts across the state, large and medium and small. I would suspect it's smaller than us. There may not be a detailed job description. It would be someone that, their main responsibility is compliance. And also, what we have a need for too is additional communication support when we have all of our mechanics, and currently Tony cannot drive. He's not able to. But at one point, everybody that was in that office was on the road in a bus, and there's nobody there. And we do cover, we have calls routed to our reception desk, but as far as the transportation service, there's no one there primarily on the team. They're all on bus. So having the ability to prioritize and make sure that person's there, and then when we fully implement our radios, having a dispatcher in the transportation department is going to be critical. So it'd almost be someone that can manage the compliance requirements as far as all the paperwork, but then also facilitate the dispatch on the radios.
Can you put that on the as an action item?
Also,
before
hire
that,
someone?
Yeah, and before that, if you would send us a job
Job
description.
description. Yeah, you
so
would
we
have
can
to
be aware of
approve that.
Yes,
What would y'all thoughts be of maybe seeing if Ms. Kim would be someone that we could use temporarily to train this person? Is that something that,
Well, she's
because it's all
offered-
new to all of us
She's
here.
offered, she's also, with the advantage of retiring, she's working with several districts. So, we could certainly benefit from her expertise. But when we identify someone, she said that she would be more than willing to both come here and work with that person, as well as she has people that's what they do, and she'd be willing to get them here to work directly with that person.
So how would that work our buses start rolling at what time in the morning? Our earliest bus?
$6.15.
6:15. And what time is our ending route?
5:15.
You would have to split, you would have somebody who was primarily dispatched, but we'd have to cover it with an overlap. And so I wouldn't propose hiring 2 people,
Okay.
but I would say we would prioritize which would be the most important time of day for them to be at dispatch. And then we would find a way to fill in the gaps with others at the different times of
So
day.
you're hiring internal compliance officer and communications support.
Basically, it's a
Together.
dispatcher, radio dispatch, and also the compliance side of all the federal and state requirements from transportation.
So then, like somebody like Tony would take over in the afternoon since he can't drive a bus, he would be your communications
Well,
support?
Tony is there, yeah, I mean, he'll be there anyway. And he can play a part in that, he may have to then be that gap fill on it and be dedicated completely to that.
Because, I mean, what time do they come in at the bus garage? They come in at 6 o'clock?
I think the first mechanic shows up at 7.
Okay.
If they're running a route, or
Yeah, they're on.
Yeah, if they're on a
Right.
route, they got
then they
to
come in.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking hour-wise, there's no way that somebody can be there from 6 o'clock in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon.
No, and right now, I mean, we have 2 mechanics that are active, and we have 2 that are on leave, medical leave, so we only have 2 mechanics.
All I was going to say is move Tony up to that position. Bring Lynn in as head over the shop and everything.
Well, I mean, Tony's already been brought back.
Yeah, that'd be a backwards trick for Tony,
Yes.
but
Yeah, I mean, that's his
I
responsibility.
mean, soon.
I'm saying he would be over the
He's over.
transportation, be over the getting the state, whatever needs to be done.
Well, that's what he's supposed to
Back
be
years
doing.
ago, it used to be the bus supervisor and Roy Gillis. Then it become Jared. Right, Jared? Wasn't that the way it was? So they took care of the buses. He took care of the paperwork and all the other. Roy Gillis did. Now, you know,
Sounds like what he's saying is this person will answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
Be an additional member of his team, and Lynn can focus more on the mechanic side instead of.
In your eyes, be more of a Roy Gillis hire.
Yeah. I don't know Mr. Gillis.
Don't either.
well, I
But-
mean, that's.
But I mean, to put in perspective for Keith, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and then I just want to press too, the amount of requirements have been significantly increased over the last several years. It wasn't just because of that incident in Hamilton County, and I know you all, I mean, in Washington County, us, we've had the same, some incidents that legislative action required, and then followed that a lot more paperwork.
I just think the paperwork itself would be too overwhelming for Tony as the supervisor over everything to have to do.
It's a lot,
So-
as a reference point.
Yes.
Even though Ms. Bradford's experience was in a larger district, they ran fewer buses, they transported more kids, they ran fewer buses, and she had a full-time compliance person. So that's her framework. And that person was hired because of all the requirements. And they had fewer buses in Washington County by about 40.
You just need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Full steam ahead.
You're putting that on the, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay,
That'll be
good.
all
We will bring, we will craft and draft a job description that's appropriate for the need. I'll even send it to Ms. Bradford and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. Do you have any suggestions on any effect? And that's what we'll bring to the board and send it to you prior to the board.
And if we need to approve something for her to come up here to. I don't
We
know.
can. I mean, this last time, there was some, I paid for her expenses to come here. It was through our available line items.
Yeah.
Just make sure that it wasn't out of pocket for her.
Yeah. Like
So
so.
it does like a contract consultant. I don't think she wants to move to Washington County. She's a lifetime Putnam County resident.
You were too at one time, now, Jerry.
But her knowledgeable, I think.
I don't know that her husband would be for that.
Her knowledge of it would be instrumental for us, I think.
She might want to take a vacation up here.
She, yeah, we encourage her.
Her husband may pay us to take her.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Good resources tapped into.
But, yeah, I mean, and she, you know, what she doesn't know, she has been involved enough, she knows people all across, not just the state, but the nation. So, you know, when you have people, resources like that, it's good to lean on them a little bit. The next item is just as a general conversation, the athletic facility study. I know that was presented at the last board meeting.
According to what y'all want to do, Jerry and I talked about, as far as the athletics facility study and the facility study recommendations, what we'd like to do, if y'all in agreement, is when we're in Nashville at the conference, is schedule something for that Friday, which we've done check, we do. There is available room Friday from 3 to 5 to go into discussion of this while we're all down there.
Is that during a small
Right.
meeting?
Small break. During a small break.
In general, the idea is like you all have done in the past around the law conference and meet afterwards. And
Yeah.
be trying to find just a time where we can have some focused retreat conversation.
And also include the safety discussion during that too, where we got a little more privacy on what we want to.
Yeah, and certainly the law allows the board in discussing specific safety measures of each school for it to be a closed meeting.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Our goal at the beginning, when we started putting the turf down, was for this coming year to tear down the stands and put back up stands. Are we still at that point? We're still on that? I just wanted to make sure we were still on that same path.
I don't think that what the Lewis Group presented conflicts with that at all.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure that was still on the paths after setting at the Viking Stadium the other night. I'm very concerned about our bleachers.
Yeah, I think too, our focus, I hope I'm thinking of it right. You know, our next step in that is to go ahead and hire the architect.
Well, you would
get
want to do
pricing
that.
To see where we're at.
I
Right.
think it would be important because of whatever the full vision of the board and the long-range facility plan. You know, the stadium piece is big, but we want to make sure it would align with all the other work.
Yes.
So if there is a conversation about the walkways and the storage areas and the buildings underneath, we just want to make sure that we don't do something where we have to come behind and create some more work after that. We want it to be, I guess, shovel-ready
Yes.
after we install the stadium,
Yes.
the new home stadium bleachers.
I just wanted, you know, after we've talked about bleachers, I've been really intentional at looking at everybody's bleachers. And I'm like pretty funny looking up and down the bleachers
sure.
and things like that. But there are bleachers that I don't think we would want for the next 50 years. And then there are
Right.
bleachers I've seen that would be perfect for the next 50 years, so.
Yeah, and I believe just based on past, the board has to have that view of it. It has to be multiple decades. So this
Yes.
update is going to need to last the community
Well, I mean, this is
a really long
lasted
time.
us.
Of course. One of the questions that was brought up, and Mr. Brain, the principal architect at Lewis Group, sent me this after the meeting, and I put that, I just captured his comments. It was asked if he could provide a comp or a recent project cost, and he shared in Knox County a similar updates of softball and baseball fields and the prices in that. He said that for that particular project, it was a little over $700,000 for the softball field, but it was a complete makeover, new lights, dugouts, press box, drainage, and all of that. And then he mentioned the baseball field was roughly just under $1,975,000 is what he was listed. And it was more of just a renovation of an existing field, more of a makeover, but same thing, lights, dugouts. So those were complete renovations to a softball field and baseball field, and that was what the cost was this past year in Knoxville.
Would it be appropriate to put that on there for an action item, just to hire architects for this next step, and then meet with them in November of what, you know,
At
they
the retreat?
yes, about their plans and what,
You can, based on the work that's been done by the Lewis Group, if that's the board's wish, you can certainly authorize them to proceed with the design phase.
can we put that on
Of
the
that.
action group for, or action item for next week?
If everybody's, what he's talking about is go ahead and put on the,
Would-
oh, I'm
would-
sorry.
I'm up to
I'm
date.
sorry.
We need-
No, I get it. I just don't know what we'd be moving forward with. We've not really
Hiring them for,
a plan.
well, we have to hire them before.
Yes, sir.
So,
You'd have to
wouldn't we
approve
want
the
to
scope of
develop
work.
our scope of work and our plan as to what we want to do before we hire somebody to do the engineering and development of it?
I didn't know if we'd done that before, or if we just go ahead with the hiring of the group and then tell them what we want for that plan to be. I didn't know.
I would think we need to meet a little more and
Okay.
kind of
develop what we
develop
want.
the scope of what we want and how the pieces are gonna fit together, because it's gonna be a multi-phase project. So like the bleachers, if we're gonna have concessions under those and storage under those, it's gonna be very particular as to what type of bleacher we get.
And
So
there's
we-
going to have to be more, that road's gonna have to be laid out there.
So
Yeah.
before we engineer it, I think we need to further narrow down what our plan, or choose what our plan's gonna be, and really
Well,
Shop
what
it
phases, shop it around, or just what phases we implement each thing and make sure all the pieces fit together.
sure. And just based on what I've been involved in the past, I mean, that's why you hire an architect.
To let them narrow the scope of work.
Yeah, you don't
Yes.
just hire, I mean, you don't come to you and you already have all the details worked out. They come to you, you identify what your priorities are, and they help you map those out.
So we should probably meet and get our priorities
And then
in
they,
line before we do
the design phase of the project would include, like you just said, the full scope of the work, and then the details have to be put in place. What they've given us is, a very good vision,
Mhm.
and that was what they were tasked to do. But the next phase is actually the design phase before you move into an actual engineering type of a phase.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're wanting to do another meeting
Well, if
just
that,
on that prior to,
I
or?
think that, there's a lot to digest there, so I think, they give us some different options, but we just need to figure out what's important
Yeah.
and that and what's not, and just
Based
get-
upon what they gave us.
kind of, and fit the pieces together,
At what
So-
point is there any money discussed in all?
well, I mean,
this?
of course,
That's what I-
anything they do, like the
Like, well, I like- okay.
the plan, it costs the board money.
Right.
And then if we move into a design phase, the architects do it for a fee.
Right.
And then at that point, we also can get closer to what the actual project cost would be when we get to the point where we have actual drawings, and that's when we would let it out to bid. So it's really that design, bid, build process that you could do instead of what I've seen it done both ways in this region, but it seems like a lot of people here do the construction management approach, where essentially you pay a construction manager to work with the architect, and then they do the design phase, and you're paying both of them.
So, clarify, do we not want to put that on our as an action item to hire the Lewis Group to give them the details, what we want, so we get the plan going forward? Or,
I don't
No.
know, I just don't know if we know exactly what we want to do yet.
Well, what is-
To move forward, that's just my question,
Yeah.
is that the right thing to do?
No, I understand, it depends on what the board wants, but a reasonable step would be, if you have a professional service that you're comfortable with, is say, now we want to move into identifying specifics and start moving into the actual design phase. So if you're working with the same architect, and that doesn't always happen, but if that's what the board decides, which is certainly your option, then the next step would be, we need to prioritize, you're going to work with us to do that, and then when we identify those priority areas, then we move right into basically the design and engineering phase.
Well, to me, we gotta figure out how much we wanna spend.
Well, I
You know,
think,
what is our,
Well, we may have to do it in phases like Whitney's saying.
well, I mean,
But we won't know how much it is until
we
we.
definitely want new bleachers.
Oh, yes.
Both
That's the
you know.
priority, I think, right
But to
now.
me, the bleacher, we need to go ahead and hire architects to take care of the bleachers because that is our plan. That's not, we've already discussed that, we've already put that into play, that is our plan. So I think with hiring them and being able to talk to them in November about the bleachers and what we're looking at, finding out how much they cost, because they're gonna give us several different costs on several different types of bleachers. So that would be then when we decide which bleacher we want at that point, and then depending, you know, on everything that goes into the pot, what we want, you know, whether it's, you know, the metal ones or
So-
what, or if they want seats, what do we want? Do we
Yes,
want
'cause
storage?
a lot of
in
it may depend what's underneath them.
Right,
What type of
so
bleacher we
I
have to
think
give them.
those come along when the Lewis group comes and says, this is what, you know, you can put here, and this is what you can put there, because the landscaping at Crockett and Boone are totally different. So it's gonna be two different types of bleachers that you're going to get for each high school, not because, I mean, that's, it's just because of the way their land lays.
It'll be a different design for
Yes,
both high schools.
yes.
But they've already showed us examples of
They have showed us
of what we
examples.
can have and
Kind
the
of what they
access
projected.
roads
The
and
vision.
all that stuff.
Yes,
So we have that basic knowledge of what they can provide.
Yeah, our next step is, if we want to move forward, is go ahead and hire them or anyone
Yes.
to start the next stage.
Specifically for those
Right.
schools.
And the Lewis group has just been so honest with us and just, I mean, just cut dry. And
And plus, if,
I like that.
since they did the facility
They did the facility
study,
study, they know what they're looking
they'll
at.
be there,
Yeah.
if they can come down.
Yeah, and you know, and obviously, any firm like that, I mean, their goal is they want to establish work and a long-term relationship.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
The best way to do that is do a good job on
Yeah.
what we ask them to do.
Absolutely.
Are these just home bleachers or home and visitor side?
Yeah, the original conversation was we need to replace the home bleachers.
Yes.
But then, knowing that it's been 50 years, there's been other additions and changes that you all know much better than I do, but essentially the stadium was established 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Now, David Crockett's is newer because they're the ones that moved.
right. So,
But you don't have.
but the bottom line is, it started out just being home bleachers, but as we said, well, we also need to look at the whole picture, and it includes now some visitor bleacher adjustments to make them more ADA compliant and just a, you know, just better flow of traffic for the attendees, and safety is also a concern. So both would be part of that, and then having a bleacher that underneath, the board has options if we want to utilize the space underneath for whether dressing, storage, concession, or all three, we would have to have it constructed in a way. If we were just doing a simple bleacher construction that we first talked about for home, we honestly could work with a vendor and they have in-house engineers at the bleacher company, but the scope of work that we're looking at is multiple phases and a lot more complicated. It is advisable to have an architect that keeps everything tied together.
Mr. Riddle?
So would it be advisable to go ahead and start floating this notion to Hugh and budget committees? Just go ahead and kind of give him updates or something, just kind of start floating it out there. They're gonna have to partner with us on this.
For the full scope of work?
Kind of the full scope, say, you know, just let them know it's coming, just as a,
Right.
hey, we're working on this, it's coming, because they will have to partner with us on this long term.
No choice.
Long-term, you know, as we've already done 3 revisions of our capital fund in the last 6 months, you know, even the last time, they know this conversation's happening, and they suspect the board's gonna have to continue to look at that capital fund budget that we've submitted, that education, to adjust based on, you know, where we land on this.
Ms. Walters?
I just, and I know everybody on the board, I can probably speak for everybody when I say this, we just don't want to say something, we're gonna have multiple projects at one school, and we do the bleachers, say, first, and then we're gonna go do a softball field. I don't want to pay for the bleachers, the landscape, all that stuff, and then them have to
Clear it up.
rip open, you know, some of the landscaping, some of the bushes, things like that, waste money. And I'm sure that's a little bit of what you were trying to get across there. I can see that happening, it's happened before, and that would be a major, major concern of mine that we don't do that.
Right, and the reality too, I mean, I think what the board's looking at, whether we get help from the commission through the Hugh budget process, it's gonna take multiple phases, which is gonna be over multiple years. Can't do it all at once, but we certainly want it designed and planned in a way that we're not going back behind ourselves and redoing one.
Correct. Thanks.
Explain.
With that tied in, and something I know we all want to get started on was the safety improvements that we need in schools. And if we hire them, just do one or the other, but I mean, I think we need to go ahead and push them to go ahead and get our ideas together on those safety improvement projects.
And that's the next item, facility study recommendations, revisiting those.
Oh, yes, sir.
And in that, of course, in their list of recommendations, the number one priority of the board,
Yes, sir.
as well as came out of the facility study, is just improving our safety measures, both external and internal.
Yes, sir. So that'll be on.
If you want the same architect to lead that process, I mean, that's the board's decision that can happen in the immediate future, is authorizing the professional firm to proceed with that.
Well, when I thought we'd meet down there with them, we'd have both those tied together.
Sure.
Our plans or whatever we'd want.
Because the first step in that long-range facility planning that I've heard all the board members state is certainly the priority of the safety issues. The entrances, you know, and continue to improve the access control, both in design of our buildings as well as other things that we need to do on the campus.
Have we heard anything about what the county commission's going to do with Boone's Creek? Is any of that?
That's all trying to just make sure that the legal language is satisfied. The last update I got.
I'm talking about the ball field.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking more about TCAP. I haven't heard any of it. You all probably have.
I mean,
I talked to Mayor Grandy last week about it, and they're opening bids up this week to see where they're at. That's what he told me. It was all put out to bid, and
When they let the bid out, my understanding was they had several alternates.
They want to cross it out.
They want to basically menu.
I mean, they're supposed to be roughly $5.5 million there that we didn't use, that can be used for the ball, the complexes at the two high schools.
From what we had put in our approved capital plan.
Yes, where we
Yeah.
didn't, where we used ESSER money instead of using.
We've already spent, 1.6 million of that on turf. And we have 3.5 million that we identified, I think it's 3.5 million that we identified for stadium bleachers specifically. These other items we talked about in the full remodel was not accounted for in those dollars.
Okay.
so you won't put that on the agenda, is that what I'm hearing? Or no?
Yes, sir.
To hire Lewis Group, to hire.
Hire an architect.
And if you're still, if it's the Lewis Group, we will certainly invite them to the meeting. And I'm sure they'll find every way they can possibly
get up.
To make sure they're there.
Since it's a service, we don't have to bid or anything like that. Since it's
No,
a
I
service.
mean, you generally solicit RFPs, but in this case, you're already working with this architect on these things. I believe under the idea of professional services, it's certainly at the board's discretion.
They probably know their way up here.
Do we not need to kindly come up with a figure in our heads that we want, that we can spend in both places? I mean,
Well, I think you have to.
Well, I
Ultimately,
mean-
the fees of the architect will be based on that figure.
yeah. So, I mean, if they come in here and it's gonna be $2 million apiece to put, tear out and put back, we're done.
And I think that's, that meeting with them in
And that
November.
ain't even getting no concession stands or bathrooms or none of that stuff.
But I think that's what the meeting will be
In November.
for November, is to hash all that out.
I'm kindly wondering if we don't need to do it before November. That
I
way
think
we can
somebody-
get something.
To make sure you're getting apples to apples, and I think that's what Whitney was talking about. You got to know what you want before you.
So we don't do that to
I
the
agree.
district's
I
playground.
agree.
Well, in the, in that design build process, that's the flow of that. And the difference between that and construction management is a lot of times the construction management process has a guaranteed maximum that you hire that construction manager to then manage the contractors to make sure it doesn't go over that or there's a penalty. But the design bid build, you work with your architect and they basically, you set the limit, but you put it out to bid. And it could be above what you thought it was, or it could be below what you thought it was. And their fee's based on what that number is.
So right now, we got 3.5 million set aside for this.
All right, but are we for sure we've got that? Or is the county commission going to use some of that to take care of Boone's Creek?
My only answer for that is that's what's in our approved educational capital fund, 5-year plan.
Well, they should be more than that anyway, because it's a new budget year. And that money, they should be money added to the capital projects money because it's a new year. Agree?
Well, we already, in our 5-year plan, we went through and allocated based on priorities, which included $350,000 for safety upgrades, and some other areas, like we have traditionally included buses, technology, and then the stadiums rolled over into that. So yeah, I mean, based on the penny rate that we get each year in that fund, yes, it's approximately just under $6 million each year based on the penny rate. That grows as the penny grows,
Yeah.
the value of the penny.
So that 3.5 should be 8.5
Well,
minus what you said. the
It is
350.
with the carryover fund balance, but
Yeah.
the board has only identified that amount for the stadium upgrades.
Well,
You could bump other things and roll money in that plan to that, but that would be revising our 5-year plan and the board prioritizing the available funds. Right.
do what?
This has been bumped for 8 years.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is that money has rolled over again. And if we plan on saying we're gonna spend $2.5 million at each high school, then that's $5 million. We got 3.5 that carried over from the last year, so it means we're gonna have to pull another $1.5 million out of that capital projects to do this project, according to what we think it's gonna cost. You see what I'm saying? Because that money's gonna leave, it's gonna be gone when Jonesburg.
Yeah, I mean, we only have essentially one more fiscal year before the payment starts, assuming they complete the project on what is currently on time. And that's when our supposedly then the payments begin, and that payment is certainly coming out of approximately 50% of that fund each year.
But what's Penny got? By that time, what's Penny gonna be worth?
Well, I mean, based on the projections, and there's been a trend of an increase. It's not a substantial increase, but it goes up every 4 years. So it could be worth, another 2 years, it could be worth 330.
Is it 330? 330?
Yeah, but after you take out, the adjustments for, it could be much higher, but,
After inflation, it might not be worth 1/3.
I know.
well, yeah,
I agree.
that part too.
I mean, I'm just saying,
So we all in agreement on this? All right, I guess we're on G.
What we're agreeing is so I'm clear, is I certainly will contact the architectural firm and tell them that the board is wanting to discuss work with them. Yes. Okay. Next item is item 4G, discussion of school buses. And really what this is just to keep the board fully updated. We have the most recently purchased buses, I guess last year went into service or were purchased. We've had problems with the engines, and they've been sent back and forth to the vendor for repairs. And we've had Scott Bennett send them a letter basically saying either fix these buses or give us our money back.
Use the propane.
Oh.
You know I love it. I love it.
It's not the Bluebirds, it's the
not the
other
Bluebirds.
It
one.
don't matter, it's still
It's a
propane.
particular engine in this particular vendor.
Hey, I
It's
totally
also a
agree
problem
with
that's not just isolated to Washington County. That's why we're sending the letter.
And to this, as of right now, we have not heard nothing back from them.
We have not received a response from them, a formal response.
I have an update. I talked to the sales lady for Cumberland. She's trying to set up a meeting between myself, Mr. Bennett, representatives from Cumberland, and then representatives from International, which is the company that actually built the buses. We're hoping to do that on October 18th.
And how many buses involved, Jared?
There's six.
Six, maybe.
You know, we've mentioned the idea of lemon law in the state of Tennessee. It's not just isolated, like I said, to Washington County.
So I guess the state contract, they're aware of.
It is isolated to this vendor, in the particular International propane.
Any problems with the other buses?
No, they're running great.
What about the electric bus?
The electric bus, we've had some downtime on that, and the company, it's electrical, obviously. It could be brakes, it could be things that are specific to related to the drivetrain.
Bro.
Yeah, that too. But, you know, Dr. Adams updated me, the company is actually over fall break gonna take the bus and do a top to bottom review of the entire bus. When it runs, it's perfect, but you know, that's what people say about
That's about any electronics.
any electronics.
It
Yeah.
works great.
You know, and just honestly, the pressure we have on them is that we're the only school system in the state of Tennessee that has an electric bus right now, and there are plenty looking at them. But, so it'd be in their best interest to make sure that we have a product that works 100% of the time.
And we'll keep you informed as we hear more from the meeting.
But yes, I figured you'd get a kick out of that.
Oh, you ain't heard the last yet.
Oh, I don't doubt that. The other is just an update on the Boones Creek Elementary School floor. You know, they being Burwell, who's done the work, what I have here for you is just the color code drawing of the work that they're going to do. And it'll be over when schools aren't in session. In the areas that they have, they're going to remove tile, put the bone dry down in those areas as well, and reinstall the tile.
So really the only place they're redoing, if I'm being correct, is going towards the gym, right there at that auxiliary gym. That's the only place they're actually redoing, is that correct? And then right behind, I guess, the little hallways where the principals are or whatever, I think.
Every area
there's a joint there.
that's, yes.
So is it just moving around once they fix one place, it opens up in another? Because at one time, it was just this hallway over here.
Well, they're redoing
Or this
that,
one?
but they've never done over there.
And some of it is not, the bone dry is believed to be working, but the adhesive needs to be pulled up because a different adhesive needs to be used. As you saw, as you all probably walked through in the summer and you saw the adhesive coming up between the seams of the VCT, I think that's what I understand is part of it is the adhesive they use. They're going to replace it and put a different adhesive.
So that won't be done until,
It'll be
school's out.
ongoing, oh yeah. I mean, and they're gonna certainly do it when they don't disrupt.
Will they start fall break, or will that start that soon?
I would assume based on what I've been told, that when there's breaks, they'll be trying to do some work.
oh, okay.
So there's nothing in this hallway on the right,
The kindergarten.
I don't
This
believe so.
but down.
Down on this.
This one,
that-
there's
that
nothing
wing right
there, and there's nothing in the hallway on around, right there where you got your
Right.
cursor and that. So if you roll that up, what is the blue there?
That's the same place.
That was already replaced.
Already
Pre-
replaced.
previously
So we have
So what they're doing
two
is in the red.
hallways that have not been touched.
The 6, 7, or
The
5
two,
and
the
6.
two
and
hallways
7,
that doesn't have a problem.
Well, no, they've
And
done
this
all the
one.
rest of them. They just never did the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. That's on the left-hand side.
Well, Chad, I can't remember, but you know more about it than anybody. To the left side there, where all the arrows is, I thought they'd already redone that. Wasn't that where them wet rooms was at?
He was on the right-hand side from the little place where you walk in right there at the bottom left, or bottom.
Okay.
And then, and I noticed that they must be fine. I guess that classroom was the worst, had the most humidity in it or whatever. But according to this, and I don't know any different, but it looks like that's good. The only place it looks like they're redoing is, like I said, that one stretch of hallway going towards the cafeteria and the auxiliary gym. And then right behind the front desk, right there, looks like the only redos.
And then is this red side not redos either?
I don't believe they ever done anything on the left-hand side. if I
So,
remember.
and I'll read
So those aren't
directly.
redos, those are just the first time they're
Yeah.
fixing it. But that wasn't there the first time that they went and fixed it. They inspected everything, and there was
Yeah.
only that one place, correct?
It was that one, right there behind the office, right there, there was one classroom that was the worst. And then they replaced all the hallways. Really, the worst was that one classroom, and then when you walk in there towards the gym, right there where the concession stand was at one time.
Yeah, so that's what I was asking, if they're fixing one spot and then there's just the water or whatever seeping up is going to another spot.
That's what we don't think, nobody knows.
Yeah, I don't think that's been their assessment.
Okay.
What, just to read exactly what Mr. Burris from Burwell said. This attachment, these are areas where we are scheduled to replace additional flooring. Outlined in red, quote, or in parentheses, previously replaced, and in blue, not previously replaced. So everything that has a color other than green is where they plan and scheduled to replace. They will use bone dry product with a different flooring adhesive that works better with the VCT, is what he said. He said that the work, they can start and do some work on longer breaks, but most of it will have to be done in the summer.
So they're not doing the classrooms, they're just doing the halls.
Yeah, I think that's where all of the problems have been identified, but not in the classroom areas. Except for that one classroom that was where they did
Yeah.
that test and they replaced everything.
Yeah, and it seems like it's not a problem as far as the color coding right there.
Yeah.
But the thing about what I'm concerned about, if you fix one place and you've got water there, the water's gonna go to the classrooms next.
Well, we haven't seen that, as far as our color coding was, we've not seen that, and that should have been in 1, 2, 3 hallways, and even, like the cafeteria was really bad, and they're not redoing that. So, it must not
But
be pushing the different
But
areas.
if they've done the cafeteria.
They did.
All right,
They did.
we shouldn't have a problem. I'm saying that our classrooms will start having problems once they seal up the hallways.
That's what I'm saying, though, them 3 hallways have already been done once. And it's
They're
not
not-
spread in
no
the classrooms,
problems.
they're not going back in the classrooms.
Right,
Yeah.
just, yeah, timing that, it's not. It's just-
And really, you should have seen the problem in the gym floor buckling, if you'd think if that was the case.
Right.
And you're not seeing that.
Yeah.
That's a full,
That's 4 years old now.
That'd be expensive.
You would think the floor would be.
Is this under warranty?
That's what he told us.
Yeah, and you know, when they do new work based on the product, it's a product warranty.
But I mean, the bone drive, the product, we're doing, it's coming over the rest of the school. The warranty's taking care of the other portions that we're having to do. That's what I'm saying.
My understanding is it's out of warranty, but they have agreed to take care of it, and in doing so, they will continue to take care of it until the problem's gone. We're out of warranty.
Yeah, the school's out of warranty.
I thought we had 5 years.
1 year, well, I was under.
Generally, under a
One?
construction,
Okay.
setup,
I could-
it's a 1-year warranty. And then other things are based on a specific product or equipment warranty. But like construction type things, that's usually just a 1 year.
Which we had problems with it right
so
off.
every time they
before.
fix it, does that renew the warranty for a year?
No.
I don't think, no, it doesn't,
Okay.
but I think like if Bone Dry has a warranty, it's associated with that. And then this VCT has a warranty when they put new VCT
So when
down.
they're finished with this, if there's another issue, are they going to back it? Are they going to fix it, or are we on our own for the rest of the entire, do we know that?
Only thing, I think several of you may have been in the conversation as well, the only thing I recall is coming into it and learning about this whole process is it was stated that we're committed to fixing this problem.
That's what he told us downstairs. That's what he told us downstairs that time.
Yes, sir, because it had been within the first year.
Mhm.
But he said the warranty's run out, but ours hasn't,
Yeah,
to fix this problem.
but they would continue to stay after it because it isn't something that did happen in the first year.
Right. Okay.
Just be glad to see this thing put to bed.
Sure.
Well, when you put 4 foot or 3 foot of shell on the pad, because it's wet, remember? Wet weather spring.
If we, ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's facilities updates. With item, is I guess 411, 4I1, sorry. Rebid for Louisa for nursing, the nurse clinic upgrades. This is being paid for out of specific grant monies, and it was just to upgrade, as it indicates, the nursing clinics in specific schools.
Looks like we approved it back in February anyways.
So we rebid because we did not receive bids or any interest. We do have a timeline on spending this grant money. Originally, it was June 30th of this last year, but they did extend it.
If you don't receive any bids this time, I mean, is this to put it out to bid? If you don't receive bids, can they just contact the companies they prefer to go with? Since you're on a time frame to.
I don't think we have that option. I think we have to, we can, I think we can try to negotiate. It would be nice if somebody would submit a bid. That would satisfy the state law and the comptroller's office much more than us just saying nobody submitted a bid.
It's a shame since it's grant money.
Right. But we certainly will do whatever steps we need to not lose the opportunity with these grant funds to address a problem that we need to address. And just to highlight on some things, Mr. Patrick just submitted some ongoing work. There's, as you can see if you pull it up,
just continuing upgrades. We're still trying to get some guidance on the Westview supports in the flooring. What's the potential solution about the corroding beams, I guess? And something that's not in here that I noticed, but is the Westview track. But I do believe as we look at that with the grade, it may turn out to be a larger project than what we might have thought. Is that correct, Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Mainly because how it was put in, it was probably never intended to be much more than asphalt or just the runoff of the water and how it runs, and then also the grade and slope of things where water would just run back and sit on the track. We would have to address that.
What structural issues are we looking at Westview?
Westview, the oldest part of Westview underneath the flooring, there's some, the engineers identified, and our staff too, some corroding beams, and it would involve, we want a structural engineer to work with to identify if the beams require replacement. And if not, then what can we do to reduce the level of moisture so it doesn't rust away essentially overeating more time. And if we have to replace it, we need a structural engineer to tell us the best way to do that.
Mr. Flynn?
Something going back towards that facility study, but on the facilities update, were all the issues that they found in all the schools, have we completed those? You know, some of them were.
Real minor.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question, but I will.
Okay.
I was gonna bring up too, of course, you and I talked about it, the boom strike, where it had some damage done. Is that something?
Yeah,
that we
we'll
need
have to get with the contractor. You know, it appears that their equipment has caused some divots in some of the track from the surfacing, so we'll have to get with them to repair.
More careful.
Yeah, hopefully
Going
they're-
there next.
Yeah.
I did talk to Logan last Friday, Thursday, whatever night I was out there, and he did say he had some patch repair he thought about trying.
Sure.
So I don't know.
We should, but I think ultimately, I mean, they should be responsible.
Well, that's kinda
If
what I
it's
thought.
just a simple patch repair, I think they should be responsible for it.
Well, there's 4 or 5 places it's, the track's completely gone.
So is there an outcome to make sure that that last one is made, because it is homecoming? What's
best-
their-
Well, I mean, they're gonna work they understand the deadline.
So, but is there projection to be completed?
Yes.
I mean, they really think they're going to be completed.
The Boone was the first one, you know, it's more or less a mirror image, and
Right.
they've gone through that one. They anticipate, and we're confident that the second time around would be faster than the first.
The
Right.
foreman told me that shouldn't be a problem.
Well, I know that, it said they were going to take a day and a half to put up one pole. They put up 2 poles.
Originally, yeah.
Yes, they put up 2 poles on one day and 2 poles on the other, and then they were working today on something, but, I mean, I just noticed that
I know it.
that was
Boone-
quicker.
At Boone, the one pole took them 2 days, the
Okay,
first one.
The first,
Okay.
after they figured
The
it
second pole, they done it in a matter of hours.
yes.
The third pole, they had some problems with the studs or something they couldn't get out. So,
out. And then,
then the fourth pole was bent.
yeah, they had a hard time with that because
Yes.
the pole had some angle in it they didn't account for.
Yeah.
It took them a lot
But
longer.
they did, I mean, I know they got up the first 2 poles in one day and the second 2 poles in the other day, and like I said, they were working on something today.
But if the
so.
lights are up there, they won't take them long to finish. I do know that.
Yeah, it did not,
Did it?
once they were wiring, I mean, we did run into a problem. I guess
Uh-huh.
the factory sent them the wrong length of wire, and so they had to reship some wire because they measured from a different point than where they should have, and they were short on wire. So that's what ran it up to the
3
midnight
days.
hour.
Mhm.
So hopefully we've overcome all those hiccups on this last install. Yes, sir.
We've been in touch with that company, and basically what we're waiting on at Crocodile are the radios that they use to control the actual lights, and my understanding is that they're supposed to be in Monday, and then they'll test the lights and the system itself, so it can do all the theatrics.
I know at Boone's, the chip was bad. They couldn't do
Right.
the strobe lights, but
And they shipped all those
together with
new
that. okay.
together, so those are supposed to be in Monday.
It's pretty neat how they link with the song. I think they up to 4 songs they can
Yeah.
we can strobe to. Pretty neat.
We're not gonna do it on the way out.
I anticipate at least Crockett taking advantage of that.
I would hope so.
It'll go well with the fireworks.
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, the main thing was Friday night, the lights worked. They lit the field well.
Phenomenal.
And we expect to see the same quality of it when homecoming comes around on the 30th at Crockett.
It's a good game, too.
Yeah. Okay.
As civil supports.
Yes, sir. Let's see here. Oh, and that's just, you know, standard item. At this time, we don't have anything, any specific requests from Dr. Meyer's team and under student supports. Next thing is the list of items I mentioned earlier when we were in the academics section, in addition to some others. So the first item is around, this one is specific to what might be summarized as the Library Book Act, or Age Appropriate Materials Act is the state of Tennessee's full version of it. What our focus is being in compliance with what the intent of the law is and what the letter of the law says, is that our libraries are supposed to have all library books and materials that are available for checkout to be cataloged and be posted on the internet, you know, on the web. And we'll certainly have the library management systems to do that, and we will be in compliance with that. The State Department issued a memo in August that indicated it also included classroom teachers' personal libraries, but there is some strong disagreement between the legislators that actually was involved in passing the legislation and the letter that was provided by the department, that their intent was it was specific to libraries. So we have not, like some districts, have caused a lot of turmoil by requiring their teachers to catalog and post their classroom library books. We will work with our teachers. You know, every teacher should know what books are in their classroom, and whether or not, as we work through this, whether or not the law ultimately says that it must be cataloged and posted on the internet for every classroom. That still has not been determined, but we will be supporting our teachers to be prepared for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was in touch with, or actually he was in touch with me, Senator Crow, in regards to this, and there were numerous teachers who had contacted me. Some of them contacted Senator Crow, asking when he was going to come help catalog the books in their classroom. He returned a call to that person and contacted me and saying that this was not the intent. Teachers were packing up their books, some of them across the state, putting them in their closet because they don't have the time to be able to do that. They were talking about the name and the title and a synopsis of each book. And supposedly this came from the DOE, a lawyer from the DOE.
It came from legal counsel from the Department of Education, sent in August, yes, sir.
So I know, I believe Johnson City did give a statement they wanted it done, and then all of a sudden now they've stopped it. And I know you did not ever put forth that requirement, but there are teachers that have spent a few hours on it across the state already, cataloging these books or putting them away. And I can tell you what it would have done with me with 35 years in a kindergarten classroom. I had 500 books, and there's no way I would have been able to do it. So their intention is to revisit this somehow, somewhere, but I haven't heard anything further from the DOE, whether they want to enforce that law further or not.
Right, and we haven't received any follow-up, knowing that those conversations are happening. You know, I tried to, in my response to Senator Crow and Representative Alexander, who I spoke with directly about it, is certainly the intent of the law. The library section is pretty black and, you know, pretty straightforward. We definitely will comply with the law there. And then understanding the intent of the law is important. And the whole, one of the greatest intent was to ensure transparency and visibility of what students have access to in our schools. And so, you know, number one priority is ensuring our library meets the letter of the law. Number two is just working with our teachers to know, you know, we have policy that is required by law in place for anyone to contest or to file a request to remove materials. And then, you know, in working with our teachers, they'll just, it's always going to be in both their best interest as well as the family's best interest for them to know every book that's in their classroom. But to send a mandate out that by this date you need to make sure you catalog every book in your classroom and write a summary of it, that's not going to come to me unless the board directs that or the law is clarified that it's a direct requirement.
So,
Now, here's your problem. Any kid can get anything they want right there.
They can.
That's right.
You know?
But, you know, again, and going back to intent, the reason that all came about, and there's some very unfortunate examples, is that there was just some materials, and some of it's not even relative to Tennessee, it's other states, that show up in classrooms, and parents were surprised and shocked that their kids had access to those things in the classroom, as well as the libraries, and that's what caused the whole discussion, and ultimately resulted in law.
is,
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm writing three things and.
Yes, I was gonna say that.
Go ahead, no, you go first.
Are we gonna have an issue along with age appropriate versus reading level appropriate?
The law does not define those.
Because, you know, you're gonna have some kids that are not ready for age appropriate materials that are reading on a lower level. Is that not gonna?
The reading level is not considered in the
Okay.
conversation. It's about age and what themes and content
Okay.
should be made available to students of a certain age.
Okay.
I had a question. If this is the same thing that the teacher in Johnson City was, is this the same thing you
She
were?
is one of them, yes.
Okay. She is putting all of the books in her library, in her classroom on a certain, I guess, I don't know what database or whatever. Where
There's no data
anybody,
where they can scan them.
anybody all over the state can access her particular.
Right.
So someone in, let's just say Putnam County, decides they are offended by one of the books she has, they, in Johnson City, they can mount a complaint or what it,
Well, usually, you know, that process is intended to be for the community in which we live in. But we get those outside agencies or individuals that file those kinds of complaints all the time, and we have to respond to them. But yes, but the intent of the library part of it is yes, it should be available on the web, a catalog list of books, and you know, and the information about those, and all of our library management system information is in there. It's just making it available for search by a parent or community member is the big lift we have to do, but it's definitely feasible. But having all of our teachers in their classroom libraries at the same level as our actual libraries, that's the bigger challenge, and that's why there were teachers across the state packing up books, because several of them amass a large number of books that they buy, that are donated to them, as you all know.
easy to do.
And they most likely have gone through all the books, but they did not catalog them. They did not, you know, create a database. And to do that does take some time. Even with a lot of the apps have where they scan the barcode on the book and it has basic details about a book, and you can create a database like she may be doing. with that device. It just still takes time. They don't have to necessarily manually write a narrative on every book if they use some apps where they can scan the barcode and pull information off of some of the databases out there about these books. But it takes time.
But like you said, though, it's gonna be more for the community, the area.
Well, it should be now, anybody, of course, with the nature of the internet, and like I said, we have people, well, I mean, as an example, and this is not the best example, but when we've had incidents that end up on TikTok or Twitter, I mean, we got hate comments and hate mail and hate emails from people all over the country. So same thing there, if somebody
It can go viral.
in Dallas, Texas sees something in one of our library databases and they don't agree with, yeah, we're probably gonna hear about it. But we're gonna follow policy about what's required to address an issue like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, if someone is offended by a book in one of our libraries and appeals it, we have an appeal process.
Yes.
If we say that book should stay on the shelves, they then have a right to be able to carry it further to the state to override what we've determined here locally. And if the state, whatever commission is dealing with this, rules against us, every school in Tennessee has to pull that book off of the shelves.
That was the big shift. You know, previously, every board had some kind of policy around the ability to complain about some materials and have a process where a parent could complain whether to exclude their child from a specific book or material or suggest it or demand it gets removed. But now it's another layer. So even at local level, if it's determined, and that's again specific to a very specific example in Southeast Tennessee where there was a book of controversy, and that's what initiated and kicked off all this legislative action. And it really wasn't, I mean, no blame should be placed on that particular school district or board. It's just that's what it elevated to. So, yeah. So we always want to remember the legislative intent, and we certainly want to follow the law. But what caused the big buzz and a lot of tears and anguish by classroom teachers across the state of Tennessee was the interpretation by the Department of Education that apparently at this point is different than the legislative intent of those legislators that were involved in passing the law. And not blaming the department, that was their interpretation, and they're charged with interpreting and administering the law, but there still has not been a decision if their interpretation is the right interpretation. And that's what we will wait for. We will comply with what's clear, and that's the library, you know, the cataloging of library books, the process. We have to have a policy about identifying or, you know, filing a complaint against materials that might not be appropriate. And then, but the big question mark is that that interpretation that it also applies to teacher libraries. So, it's just good practice. I mean, we want to make sure if a parent has a question about something that might be in a teacher's classroom, that there's at least a process where they can express their concerns and have it really looked at, which was already there previously. Anyway. 6B is educator support proposal.
If I may.
Yes.
I realize this is old news. Mr. Arndt's statements made in that supposed private get-together with the governor. I'm sure a lot of you have read that there have been positions all across the state taken. I feel it's appropriate for us to take one, even if it is 7 weeks later. And I especially have wanted to make it educator. Some of them have just spoken directly to teachers. I'm a believer that everybody in the school system has a part in educating a child, whether it be a cafeteria worker, a custodian, a principal, paraprofessional, and especially a teacher. And I think our board needs to take a position in support, and I have a resolution that I'm going to want to have on the agenda for us to be able to vote on and support, basically reaffirming our commitment and support to public educators within our district and commending them for their dedication and support in making our school system one of the best in the state. It's a simple sentence, shows our support. I think it's just something, even though if we're tagging along with the other school districts, I think it's something that our educators here in the county need to hear from us.
And we're not sending, are we sending this to the legislator, or we're just making a statement?
I mean, that would be up to the board.
I think we just need to review it and then we'll discuss what we want to do from there after everyone has a chance to read it.
I think by the reaction of our regional or local representatives and Senator Crowe, you know, they absolutely agree with what you shared.
Well, you made a tremendous statement as well, as well as the other legislators, and I commend them for doing that. And I do want to speak to it at the meeting in a little bit more detail than I'm doing tonight. I take it personally. I've been in the business in a long time. It'd be like telling Keith anybody can come in and run a dairy farm.
They can't, anybody's stupid enough to do that.
Or anybody else in any other profession here that states that. So I will
Yes, sir.
take that time next Wednesday to be able to speak to it a little bit
Mr.
more.
Plain?
Only thing I've got against it, Greg, and I shared with you, is I'd like to see it, and I know it's not your intention, and I'm glad it's not, but there's got to be a better heading than just educator support proposal. You know what I'm saying? Only thing I don't want to send out a mixed message to anybody that has anything to do with the system, and that is your intention, that we are saying, hey, all of you are educators. I just want to be crystal clear, because I don't want to offend one because they don't feel like they are an educator, because they're a cafeteria worker, bus driver. So, you know, I know that's not your intention,
Right.
but I just want to make sure we're crystal clear, because only the headline's going to jump out. And if somebody doesn't feel like they're a part of that headline, then they're going to feel like, well, they're not appreciated, which I know it's not your intent.
You're going to make sure it's written that way, correct?
I'm here.
But I'm saying just the header, and everybody knows, I mean, you know, people just read it on the header, don't click on the whole article to understand. And I'm going to say this, and it's probably not a good thing to say, so forgive me, but every time a fool talks, doesn't mean you have to respond. I mean, that guy was foolish for what he said, and
I agree, he's foolish for what he said, but our educators want to make sure. They didn't say that about the cafeteria people. They said it about our teachers.
I'm saying if we say, hey, we appreciate all the educators.
Well, he said it about teachers, but then he went on to say that anybody can educate a child.
Yep.
And so I'm saying that all of our employees are involved in education of children. And so to me, it's directed at all educators as well as including teachers.
And he also slammed the colleges
Oh,
that
correct.
train the
Yes.
educators.
I don't really have a problem with what you're saying. I think it's good, but I think just the timing of it's the only thing. The ship's kind of sailed on that a little bit. But I agree, all educators are important and agree with what you're saying. But that,
I think if you put it in BOE Connects for all us to review prior to, then we can discuss it there. All right, C, please.
Is entrance procedures for parents, visitors to school.
This is me again. Forgive me. I'm new to it, and I have not had a chance to be able to visit all the schools. I'm looking forward to in October being able to do that. I'm familiar with Boone's Creek School, Daniel Boone. And I know at Boone's Creek, you go and you get buzzed in the front door, and then if you want to get to the front office, you got to be buzzed in there. If you want to get to any classrooms, you got to be buzzed in there. My first question is that the way it is? I know it's not at Boone, Is that the way it is in all our K-8 schools, to where they've got to go through a double procedure to get into the office, 2 doors to be able to get to the kids? What is it like in the other schools? I don't know. And I brought it up as an item because I don't know if
That's
the
why
other board
we've been
members know
talking
that.
about safety.
I think it only is one,
They
right?
all have controlled access. They have to ring in, buzz into the school, be let in through that controlled access, either electronic controlled access or it's a magnet, which is electronic itself. But the design of some buildings, that security vegetable idea where they have to go into an area, then they have to be let into another area,
Right.
it is only currently the case in some schools, not all schools.
And that's the assessment we have done, and that's what we're gonna be talking about at the retreat on security. Upgrading the other schools as
Right,
previous.
okay. Let me follow that up with, if somebody comes to the door and say they've got a conference with Mrs. Smith, they don't have a conference with Mrs. Smith, they're there for ill doing. How do they check to make sure and they don't let this person in? Do they contact the teacher to say, do you have a conference with this person time? Or are they just buzzed in? What happens if they've got a lunch? Hey, I'm grandpa and I brought my lunch for Billy or somebody. Do they have to show any type of ID if there's only one entrance at the camera to be able to look at before they're buzzed into the school?
They do not show an ID. They check into the office after they're let into the school.
I think Ms. Buchanan has a thorough
So-
answer for that.
I do, well, most of our secretaries have been there or from our communities. And they know just about everybody that comes to their door. But I know at Lamar and South Central, the secretaries have a calendar. And if there's a meeting with a teacher, it's on that calendar. And so they know who's coming and going. They're
Okay, good.
very, the safety wise, they're very adamant about protecting our kids. And
And then you have
so,
run in with SROs at one point in time, trying to get in?
didn't what?
Did you have a run in with SRO? Because,
No, that was a DTSU.
okay, I was not.
It was not our SROs.
Okay.
And
They
then
don't,
also, I mean, in
don't
protecting
run
our kids, certainly number one priority, but if someone's coming to speak to a teacher and it's
Uh-huh.
not during their playing time, or it's not even a time where they can be available, and they may get to the office and check in, but they're not gonna pull them out of the classroom.
Right.
They're gonna protect their instructional time.
And our SROs are right there.
Yes.
I mean, if you go through the door, they can see you through there. Now, is it the safest? It's not, but we are working very hard at all the schools with adding SROs, and, we have that secretary there checking people in to make it as safe as we can until this board can take care of the safety issues that have been found by,
Prioritize.
but yes, so we can fix those.
And our schools deal with it every day.
Yes.
In the sense of, if they're in a school where there's not that secure vestibule, and they have to go to the office, and they have opportunity. I mean, our people chase them down. They get mad. People in public get angry, and offended, but, safety's more important than their day. And so, and they have, and our people, I commend them, they have the courage to do what's right and address those people. And it's not always pleasant, because people get mad when they get called out, especially if they're doing something they probably know they're not supposed to be doing. And, but the bottom line is, they're doing really well trying to maintain
They are.
that, even if they don't have a setup like Boones Creek Elementary School. And, that's ideal. And actually, it's an ideal situation is like the design at Jonesboro Elementary School. That design probably is the most ideal design
Oh, I forgot about
for
that
school
one,
entrance,
yes.
where they have to go to
The
the
one now or
office.
the one that's coming?
The new Jonesboro.
The new one,
Elementary
okay.
School, yes. And it was designed with all of the, just all the years we've had to identify what's the best way to design an entry of a school, and theirs is designed really well. That's the model we want to use when we're thinking about updating our other schools. How can we get closer to that model with the structures we have?
If somebody appears at the door saying that they've got a lunch because somebody forgot it, and this person is not their father or mother or somebody to bring it in,
Yeah.
what's the procedure then with letting them in with the lunch?
I don't know that they would let them in.
Would they let them in?
I mean, I don't know that they would let them in. If they do not recognize that person, or, you know, I have to pick up the phone and say, hey, so-and-so's bringing this kid this lunch, I really don't think our people would let them in.
They're pretty discriminating in the way we want them to be.
Yes.
They would question. And even if they let them in, if they got to the office and said, this needs to be delivered to this student, and they didn't see the relationship, or they weren't on the list to be able to even to pick up that child, they would not deliver that item. They would send them out.
And once again, that's what we're going to do is discuss, and if we can get these things in place and these sally ports placed in these schools, we're not going to have to worry about that, because they may be let in the first door, but at that point, they're not going to have anywhere to go. So it's going to take time. Everybody I've talked to in the public, at work, is extremely excited that this board is prioritizing safety for the students, and myself as well. So I commend the board for prioritizing that.
Yes, and we know, and I've heard board members say it, we know some of our schools, I mean, it's not going to be an inexpensive endeavor, but it's the right thing to do, and we have to prioritize it. I mean, some it's just a matter of just some small modifications to get it closer to the model, whether it's the new Jonesboro Elementary model or something like a Boones Creek Elementary model, where there's another step of control there in access.
You know, it's just amazing the amount of knowledge of our communities and our kids and their families that our secretaries, the people who work in the office, know, because they have to know whose custody issues and court order issues and all of that. And they are just, I mean, it's commendable what they retain and know immediately off the top of their head when they see who's at that door.
But through research and us hearing of other things, we might get new ideas to where we can make suggestions to Mr. Boyd, where he can further make suggestions to our teachers, our secretaries, our staff, to where this is safer, let's do this, you know. So there's time for this, and we're going to get this figured out together.
Yeah, I'd just rather see him say, well, leave the lunchbox outside the door and we'll come out and get it, and just send them on their way.
You know, and you can,
Just go away.
you know, when
Thank
we
you.
go on our school trips, you can probably ask the secretary, what do you do in this situation? And they'll probably have an answer, because they've probably been through it.
Good, bad,
But they're busy.
The good, bad, and the ugly, that's right.
You know, it's always, whether it's the board's responsibility to look at our safety measures or the people that are actually doing it every day. I mean, there's always room for improvement.
There is.
I mean, you know, when I walk in a school and somebody grabs the door behind me and they haven't gone through the budget process, I mean, that happens. But, you know, what I usually do, I don't make a big deal of it. I just make sure I walk with that person to the office. And then say, or sometimes I model it. I let the person that's going in, it's already been buzzing, go in, and then I wait and buzz in myself. Even though I have a key to get in. That's great.
Lead back then.
Sometimes I want them to know I'm in the building, and sometimes I just want to walk straight in.
I'm sorry. Stand by.
I do.
But they don't. Anyway.
Item
They
D,
done called.
item D, I think we've went over. Anything else you want to add to that, Mr. Jerry?
Yeah, if there's any other, the third grade retention, I did upload specific documents that are in there for your review that you may or may not have seen before. It's the actual legislation. It's also information the departments put out on third grade acceleration and remediation on retention. toolkit, just so you see what we see and what resources and support we have as we're trying to navigate this. And it includes some sample letters that the State Department has provided and several districts are using to send home to parents. So the vocabulary is the same across the community.
Is it gonna be revisited next session, like in January? I mean, if they've got legislators and have gone back to their perspective and they've had feedback, do you think it will be?
I think so. I think they're pretty, they being our legislators, they felt like there's been a lot of due diligence on this, but what you all have seen, and I certainly have seen over the years, everything's open in the legislative
Okay.
session.
That's
And there'll be bills. They may not get very far, but there'll be bills to completely change this law.
amended or whatever.
But it depends on the will and the focus of the legislators on how bought in they are to this. And if they're bought into it and the leadership is, it's not going to change.
They may have to put some money behind it then.
Yeah, of course, the common response right now in anything,
Mhm.
it's in TISA.
Oh, okay.
The new funding formula, the
Yep.
response we get the most often is, well, that's in the formula. Okay. But, yeah, it's a really, there's several states that have passed legislation. Probably the one that may be the most commonly referenced is Mississippi. There was the doom and gloom prediction that the majority of students were going to be held back, and then the reality was it wasn't that way. But there were still quite a number of kids that were subject to be retained because of the law in Mississippi. I think Florida's passed a similar law.
Mississippi's what, 50? in
Yeah,
education?
Mississippi
That's
is
just the one we want to go by.
They passed a law because they were defeated. I mean, they
Well,
were trying to do
yeah.
something. I don't know that the impact has been the level they wanted to be yet,
Mhm.
or ever. But Mississippi's usually referenced as one of the states that's passed this kind of legislation. But, again, main concerns, it's not about accountability. It's number one about the timing. We were in the middle of a pandemic and struggling with trying to provide consistent educational opportunities for kids. And then the legislature seemed to think it was time to pass this law in January 2021. So, anyway. And like every law, that law was passed then and not to be implemented until a year later. And when they do that, it kind of stays dormant. The conversations kind of are low level until it's time to implement it, and then it gets elevated. And then people start seeing the reality of what it might do, and that's where we're at right now. So do I think there'll be conversations in the next legislative session about it? Absolutely. Yes, sir.
What's interesting is that when you're talking about special education students, they talk about all the different things that you've got to do to qualify a child for special education. That it isn't done on one test, it's done by a lot of different evaluations, and yet you've got this mandate here saying that, well, we're going to have one test, and then if the child doesn't score high enough, then, well, they could go to summer school or they could get a tutor. And the feedback, which we've already mentioned, some parents, kids just don't test well, some of them don't. So on the one hand, you've got all these examinations and things that get a child qualified for special ed, but we're only going to go on one reading test, which, by the way, and I saw the video that you had sent, and that superintendent, I forget which county she was from,
Yeah.
and her,
She was.
I don't know if anybody else watched that.
Clinton City.
At all, but that 40% of the test was done on vocabulary and grammar, and it wasn't a true reading test itself. So it's not a good test to begin with, let alone only use one of them. So.
And that's the case. We also have to frame it as, that's the first time that, and for most students in Tennessee, they take a state assessment in the third grade. Now, there are some districts, Washington County used to be one, that give a second grade test, similar to the third grade test. But the majority of districts don't give that second grade test. It's optional. And there's a lot of argument of why that shouldn't be given in the second grade. So that's the other thing. It's the first time that students are taking an actual state test where you have all these time limits and that whole process. So, and then we're making this decision and calling 70% or 65% of our students illiterate and that they don't read on grade level because they don't perform a proficient level of test when it's not even a reading test.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we do give benchmarks that are reading throughout the year.
Those start in kindergarten. You know, they're frequent assessments of reading in kindergarten. And the teachers in the schools certainly identify students, whether it's, you know, a lot of reasons they're not reading like they should, but the idea that there's 65% of students because of the third grade test not reading on grade level is not really 100% accurate, because that's not a reading test. Now, somebody, if a student can read, yeah, they probably do better on the test.
And I will be glad to meet anybody after the meeting and let you know why kindergarten first and second should not take a week-long standardized test. I'll be happy to meet with you and give you firsthand,
Well, they're still developing,
experiences.
you
Mary
know,
doesn't have an
language.
issue, you can see me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right, item F. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just make a
Yes.
comment? You know, it may be great for us to think about, we know that there's going to be questions, we know that there's going to be things brought up about this, probably in the near future now that it's coming back to light. You know, if we, like Ms. Buchanan and you had said, maybe we don't agree with the one test and the whole, you know, legislation that they've made, can we be instrumental in possibly getting that amended somehow to where it's a series of tests throughout the year, or it's a series of, you know, a combination of things, because I wasn't a child that tested well at all. I just couldn't sit still. So my wife will tell you right now, I still can't sit still. But you know, I think we owe this to our community's students, and looking at them like I would myself when I was their age. You know, I think that it would be great for us to, I don't know how to do it, but try to possibly be a trailblazer in trying to get this amended in some way to truly accurately benefit our student body.
I like the way you put that.
Of course, being a Crockett graduate, you can also be a pioneer.
But I graduated from Crockett. But yeah,
That's not what you said.
We are not biased around here.
I'm not one-sided, you know. I'm just, or you can be a pioneer.
Yeah.
You know,
And TSBA is all over that. I seen something
I
from
bet there'll
them.
be discussions at the annual conference,
Yeah.
and the school board conference.
Yeah.
It certainly was the major discussion at the recent superintendent's conferences. And I just want us all to be careful, and I will be too. Absolutely, kids reading and reading well by the time they get out of third grade is important.
It's very important.
I think
It
their
impacts
attention's
you.
good. It's just,
Well,
It's
there's just too much,
overbearing.
there's too much data that shows retention is more detrimental
Yeah.
than it's not.
right.
I just wonder if crafting a letter to you know, Tim and Rebecca and them, just saying, hey, this is just way over the top in some manners. This, you know, just one test, one day determines their outcome. You know, no matter if they have A's and B's, and the teacher's saying, they do well, I don't understand why they're failing this. You know, well, okay, guess what? Well, their dog died the night before. They're not gonna test well. It's not gonna happen.
I just think we ought to wait till January to do it, just to see what
And they may touch on
TSBA
Monday
is.
too.
and what-
Yeah.
The fall.
Just-
And whenever's
Yeah.
fine. I just
Yeah.
kind of want to put it out there that we could really,
Lose a resolution at this
Well,
point.
what I
But just
suspect
this
is-
board's,
Is any change to the law that may happen in the spring, it may be giving local boards more flexibility on an exemption process. So, you know, if we have those interim, you know, tests that happen throughout the year that are more focused on reading, the burden would fall on the school system and the school to show that data to then prove to the state that we're not just exempting everybody.
Right.
This child has proven that they can read. It's just that particular test, they didn't do what we wanted them. I mean, they didn't meet expectation, but they can read. So they've labeled them and potentially to be retained because the idea is they can't read is just not accurate.
And I don't believe that their intentions, like he said, that I don't think they're intending to, have a big, retain a bunch of children and students. I think their intention was to be more focused on this age group to make sure, especially after the pandemic, that they are well taken care of to where they can keep up as they go along through school. I don't think it was to hold kids back. I don't think that.
No, and I think that's exactly why, and I was still part of that team at the department when we were preparing for that legislative session. And it was very intentional to not call it a retention law. It was about accelerating learning because we just dealt with several months of challenges, and then remediation so that we prevent retention.
Right.
But retention was a component that was in the law because after you do all those things and you haven't been able to accomplish, then retention was expected.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Hammonds?
What would you all think? Rusty's suggestion, just Washington County Board get together with Tim and Becky and himself for 1 hour only. We've done it before with John City, but just with Washington County between now and December, and just discuss any items of concern. If you all can pick a time and a schedule and get with Tim.
I think that's a good
Add Tim
approach.
in there.
And it was
Add
great.
Tim in there because, I mean,
Tim,
yeah.
no, I was
All of it.
including.
Oh, I did not hear that. I only heard Becky.
All of our representatives.
Yeah.
And Tim's actually on the education committee on the
Yes,
House side.
that's why I was.
And so was Senator Crow.
I was trying to work around Rusty's schedule
Yeah.
because he's got 3 counties.
Yeah.
That's all, I mean.
Yeah, but Representative Alexander, of course, she's very vocal and has been very
But it could be
supportive.
very informational for us because I did not know we had all that time. I didn't know we had February to go through to be able to speak to them and get their full
They-
They
attention.
just said very informal, no food.
Yes.
If anything, just, call me.
Yeah.
Just so they hear you all.
Yes.
The meeting with the Johnson
great.
City Board was very nice, but this would be more, this is Washington County's concerns, and we want to talk with you directly about it.
And it's nothing against them, but Johnson City meets with them
They
also.
will.
Yes.
And so, I mean,
Yeah, I think that's important. We'll definitely, like you said, between now and December, so it's fresh on their minds as they gear up through Christmas to go back to session in January. Plus, we have an election that's happening in November, and if there's any changes, we have to adjust.
Okay.
Mike?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, as a sidelight, and Mary Beth can definitely go along with this, the problem isn't in 3rd grade. The problem is not that they're not learning the stuff that's in 3rd grade, is they didn't learn it in kindergarten, they didn't learn it in 1st grade, they didn't learn it in 2nd grade, and they bring that baggage to 3rd grade. A repetition of 3rd grade isn't what they need. It's a repetition of some of the things that they didn't learn in 1st and 2nd grade. And the way the legislature can best deal with it is to provide additional funding to hire more teachers to be able to lower class size in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, those primary grades. If you're going to retain a kid, and I have done that, it's got to be in the lower grades. I'm not saying it's the greatest benefit, but that's the time to do it. 3rd grade is not the time to do it. The second thing, and this was off of one of the counties that I got off of the web, it might have been Murfreesboro. They passed a resolution basically urging the Tennessee General Assembly to amend TCA 49-6-3115 to allow school districts to make retention decisions for 3rd and 4th grade students based upon all district school info on each student. And that's what they passed, and that's what they sent to their local legislators.
Right, and that, I believe that was Rutherford County.
Yes.
And of course, Murfreesboro. Then Murfreesboro City did not, but it wasn't because they didn't agree with it. They just didn't think they wanted to do that. But yeah, talk to those superintendents.
Okay.
But no, that's the argument at the recent superintendent conference, and the discussion is about local autonomy and flexibility. Of course, a lot of times when you get in that discussion with some of our state legislators, is they say, well, you've had that opportunity, now we have to pass legislation that takes that, limits that, because nothing's happening. but I don't think you completely eliminate it. I think what they have said in their resolution makes sense. We have multiple measures. We have more data than we probably ever have had on kids. And so we know that it doesn't just happen in third grade. And we also know that our teachers across the whole state of Tennessee are revising their knowledge on systematic phonics and learning how to teach phonics better. And so, I mean, there's things in place to make sure that we address the issue earlier instead of third grade. It's going to take some time, but one test is the big issue.
Correct.
To make a decision like that. And then remove the parents' opportunity to request an exception. Remove this local school district's opportunity to request an exception. You know, that just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Especially with this push of parent involvement that everybody's pressing for and everything going around, and now we're saying, oh, well, except in this case.
But we all agree it's so important for as many students as possible to have a very strong foundational skills in reading by the time they get through third grade, and continue to develop and strengthen those as they move through the upper grades.
Okay, let's see, we're on E.
Yes, sir. Time slot for
Oh.
people wishing to address.
All right, that's my last one. I started coming to the board meetings in October and continued on, and I watched the representative from Washington County Education Association come and speak. Sometime the person spoke about a bill that they were interested in seeing us support, or you support at that time. A time of thanking you for the salary adjustments that really helped the people. I think the last board meeting was kind of a welcoming for us and the new board members. And I watched that person sit there for a long time before she or he could get up and make their statement. These are people that we're charging with teaching our kids, and just waste that time sitting there listening to items that they're probably not interested in, I think is a waste of their time. And I would like to see us revisit the time that that person is allowed to address the board. I know we have a thing to where people address the board according to specific items on the agenda. That's not the case with this person, or people that come here. And I'd like to look at another spot on the agenda, whether it's within a half hour or wherever we could place them, but they don't have to sit through that time and waste their time when they can be working on lesson plans rather than sitting here.
And then have to get up the next day and go.
Correct. And, I'm open, just opening that up for discussion, that I mentioned it to her, and she just had the biggest grin on her face, like, that would be the best thing that you could ever do. We're not in a hostile situation with the Education Association and collaborative conferencing, so I don't see a reason to punish her or him to have to sit through all that. So where else it could be placed to where that they could give their 2 minutes or whatever they're allowed, I would like to see us consider.
Well, I think being the new chair, I think it's mine and Jerry's decision. And I don't think it's a waste of their time to sit through our meeting, number one. And number two, their presentation is based upon a certain part of the agenda, which is, every last 2 or 3 times has been very broad.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do we place them according to what they want to say on the agenda? There's no other place. And of course, now we've changed our workshops and our meetings, we're only here less than an hour, hopefully. So it ain't like we're sitting there 2 or 3 hours. But Jerry and I will take into consideration when they are on the agenda. They're only placed on agenda when they have something to tell us. They're
Right.
not standing like they used to be.
I feel like
So-
sometimes we vote on what they're talking about, and then I feel like they're just kind of like, okay, now I've said this, but you've already voted.
Mhm.
So,
But again, like I said, it's Jerry and I's decision, and we will take it into consideration based upon their, where they want to be on the agenda, or as far as what they want to speak of.
I have have been here where they have had to sit, like when their meetings would
Oh,
go
yes.
on till 10 and
Yes.
10:30 or
Mhm.
11.
Mhm.
And that was long, but like you said, they are a little bit more brief than that.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Okay, next is board committees. I think I went over them, I think we don't have it too with board members on sick leave. We left the same with Mary Beth and Chad. The calendar is every 2 years, so we don't really have a calendar meeting, committee this year, but if we do, Annette, Whitney, and David still on it. We didn't make no changes to them. And the rest of the committees are made up of administration and teachers. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then we changed the format.
Yes.
So, and then item 8 is superintendent. And right there's, I mean, if you may want to see it, right there's a list of board committees.
And I don't have any specific items. I think everything else under the other sections.
We've done covered. Okay. And then the last thing I have is upcoming events. This little FYI, school visit starts October the 11th. And I think we've got a list of them already put in so you can review it. We do start October 11th on our school visits. Of course, Monday the 26th is fall district. Jerry and I do have a planned meeting with the 2 new board members, I think at 2:30. Then the bus or the van will leave at 4:30 headed to Bristol. So.
It starts at
Yeah,
5,
it starts.
We're leaving at 4:30. I thought we
Is
were
it 4?
leaving at 3:30.
Is it 3:30? I think it's 3:30. I had put down 4:30, but I might be wrong.
I think we said we probably need to leave at or close to 3:30. just
Okay, my bad.
In the event of traffic or whatever.
Yeah, so we're
Make
leaving-
sure that van makes it there.
So van's leaving at 3:30 on Monday. So, what else did I have? We're going to try to visit Jonesboro New School again, maybe October, November, depending on where they're at. Jerry will try to schedule that with us, depending on weather, and hopefully when they get it under roof, we can go in and visit one more time.
Well, I put some pictures on there and Mayor Best said he'd like to be included this next
Okay.
time.
We'll just,
Well, why should he?
We'll invite everybody.
And we'll try to do it before the workshop again like we
should've
did
been
last
there
time.
anyway.
Well, he saw him on Facebook.
I don't know that he was aware that the board was
No,
scheduled.
he did not, no.
Then our annual convention is November 10th through the 13th. And keep in mind, leadership is on the 10th. So if you plan on going to leadership, you may want to let Jennifer know, go down on the 9th. And also, when you attend the leadership, that is level credits you get to your boardsmanship.
Have you picked the delegates yet?
I have not.
Okay.
Have not. And then during that retreat, the 11th, Friday from 3 to 5 is where we're going to have the retreat with Lewis Gruber on the athletic. And please let Jennifer know how many you have going to fall districts or fall
Are you
convention.
bringing someone with you?
If you're bringing someone or how many's in your party. We are going to try to schedule something for dinner on Friday night.
Well, if we get our new van, I was hoping that Mr. Boyd could drive us all down there in the new van.
Well, I think our new van will come in probably
Exactly.
this time next
I was
year.
gonna say.
No, I do not want to be driven down there.
You don't wanna go
I
to
might
Buffalo.
have other places I want to go.
And keep in mind,
It wouldn't look good for,
you may not leave until the 10th. It's Gordon if you want
Maybe
to
we could
go to
go on
leadership or not.
You could go on a propane bus.
Yeah, we could go on a propane bus.
Anything else, Jennifer?
Hopefully
No,
not
I'll
one
send out a
having
very
problems
detailed email of what I need to know.
I wanted to ask Jennifer, have you sent out a year-long, you might not have planned it that long, where you've scheduled the workshop and the, you have, well,
Yeah,
where do I need to go?
you all approved it, and it's on the website.
It's on.
Do you mind pulling it up?
I'll look for it.
Oh, and keep in mind, our October board meeting is Wednesday the 28th
Yeah,
because of fall break.
Right, 6 days.
yeah, moved to Wednesday.
Right.
The original approved was Thursday, but the last time
Right there
you all
it is, Ms. Elliott.
adjusted it.
Adjusted that.
Wednesday.
But there it is, Mary Beth.
Okay, hang on.
And I've put, this one has the revisions from that last meeting,
Okay, good. Thank
so
you.
those are noted.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else?
In that December meeting, we'll be having dinner.
You good?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
Does anybody want to hear why you don't want to give standardized testing to?
No.
No.
Everyone agrees.